From Doidi, all of this comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then in turn, HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds, Doidi li. HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds to us after we have turned to Him. Says the Rebbe really in Shir HaShirim. There are two psukim. There is a pasuk, Doidi li v'ani loi. However, this pasuk is a different Indian in Avodas Hashem. This does not relate to the Avodah of Elul. What relates to the Avodah of Elul? Ani le doidi v'doidi li, because this abbreviates Elul. Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, and this is what the Avodah of Elul is. How we turn to our Master, and our Master responds to us. In other words, we realize that this is something which our chayis, our life, is dependent on. And when we realize that this is what our chayis is dependent on, based on that, we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then we get the response from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. Here the Rebbe led into another reading, to the concept of Avos Yisrael. Our responsibility to love another Jew, to the extent that before we begin davening every morning, we say, Hareini mekabel alai, mitzvat asay shel v'ahavta l'rayacha kamoicha. We accept upon ourselves the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. And this is not something which we accept upon ourselves in theory, but it's something which we should bring out into poil, bring it out into reality, bring it down, practice it throughout the entire day. How can a taka be that a yid should have the love l'rei'acha, to love a friend kamoicha like we love our own self? After all, we know that a person is much closer to himself than he can be to somebody else. This can be understood regarding the menorah which was kindled in the Beis Hamikdash. There's a pasuk, Miksha achas zahav. The menorah had to be made from one piece of gold, and then this one piece of gold was divided into the 7 kanim of the menorah. What does this show? The same thing is Knesset Yisrael. The same thing is the Jewish nation. Jewish nation, we are Miksha Achazov. Klal Yisrael is united, that we are all one. And based on the fact that we are Miksha Achazov, we are all one, we all originate from one source, we are all one. Therefore, we can have a love to a fellow Jew. Kamoicha. Why? Because it's not that I'm liking somebody outside of me, it's somebody who is part of me. Because it's Miksha Achas, we are all from the same. However, at the same time, just like the menorah was divided into 7, there were the 7 candles of the menorah, the seven different lights of the menorah which were lit. The same thing, Klal Yisrael's B'rad Yisrael is also divided into 7 categories. There are different types of Yidden, different categories of Yidden. However, all of these categories originate from this one source. So that is why we can have Avos Yisrael to the extent of Ahavta l'rei'acha kamoicha. Why? Because the rei'acha, the fellow Jew, is part of me. He comes from the same source as I come from. It is Miksha Achas, this one, the Achas which expresses unity. This is the source where we all come from. Therefore, we can have the love to a fellow Jew kamoicha, like I am liking myself. But at the same time, also we know that there are different divisions in Yidden. 7 categories in Yidden. And we also know that there's a concept of chayecha koydim. Even though we are told that we have to extend our love to a fellow Jew and love him as we love ourselves, nonetheless, there are certain matters which we have to know and realize that these certain matters, if it's a matter of chayis, if it's a matter of life, we have to know that we have to prefer ourselves upon somebody else. To such an extent that if it's a question regarding learning Torah, who ubenoi is a mitzvah in the Torah of Vishinantam Levanecha. It is the obligation of the father to teach his son Torah. If the father is in the unfortunate situation where he can only afford to pay for the learning of Torah for one, the father does not have any knowledge of Torah, and it's a question of him learning Torah or his child learning Torah. So the Gemara tells us, who kaidem? The father has a preference above his child. Why? Because chayecha, even we're talking about a son, we're talking about a child, where there's an obligation of a vishantam levanecha on the son. Nonetheless, if it's a question of him learning Torah, and if he'll teach his son, he will be deprived from learning Torah, he comes before the son. Unless, says the Gemara, where the son is a memulach. That's the expression the Gemara uses. In other words, where his son is real sharp. In other words, by his son learning Torah, his son will have a tremendous accomplishment in learning. His son has a very, very good head, and he will grasp Torah very well. So there it will be more gain for the son to learn than for the father to learn. But what we derive from all this is that there are times when chayecha is koydem. One has to know that for himself, if it's a matter of life, if it's a matter of chayis for him, then he comes before somebody else. And here we come back to the inyan of anila doidi v'doidi li, that a yid has to realize anila doidi, that this inyan of elul, this is a matter of chayis for him. This is our source of life, and therefore he has to connect himself with doidi, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this will bring the response of doidi li, the attachment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu back to him. This comes out in the Shabbos when we read in the Torah Pashas Ri'ei. What is the title of Ri'ei? Ri'ei means to see. And here we come to a concept which the Rebbe kept on stressing very strong throughout the entire Farbrengen. There is, see this is explained at length, there is Riyah and Shmiyah. At times we can hear something, and at times we see something. See this explains that Riyah has a much stronger impact when we see something, we visualize it with our own eyes, it has a much stronger impact on us than something which we hear. There's a famous expression in Chazal, Einoi doima shmiya l'riyah. One cannot compare when we hear something as if when we see something. Seeing, vision, leaves a permanent impression. When we hear something, it could come in from one ear, it could go out from the other ear, there's an expression. However, when we see it, it leaves, see this uses the expression his amtus, it leaves a certain emes. It creates the truth in front of us that it remains with us eternally. And that is the concept of Re'ei, that this whole idea of Elul, we have to visualize it. We have to see it. It has to become part of us, just like something which we have seen. And here the Rebbe adds on, Re'ei, the numeric value of Re'ei, Reish is 200, Aleph is 1, and Hey is 5, is a total of 206. We will take it, when we do Gematrias, it's customary to use the Koilel, in other words, the word itself. The word Re'ei. The word Re'ei, we can count for 1. So we have a total of 207. 206 plus the word Re'ei. So it's a total of 207. What does 207 equal? Roz, secret. A roz, in Aramaic, means a secret. Rozin, so. Roz. What else equals 207? We spoke about it at length last week also. The word oyer, lichtigkeit. Oh, Aleph and Vav is 7, and Reish is 200. Again. What does this mean? It means that this inyan of Elul has to affect the person through and through. It has to bring the oyer, the lichtigkeit, the light, the illumination of Elul has to permeate the person, even in the areas which are in a category of Roz, in the concealed part of the person, in the part which is considered an area of secret, covered up. Elul has to reach into the entire person, and bring lichtigkeit, and bring the light of Elul, and illuminate with this message of Elul, with this message of Anila Doidi, into the entire person. But to conclude it, that from this inyan of vision which we are talking about now, this inyan of Re'ei, this should lead to it that we shall see the third Beis HaMikdash. Just a few weeks ago we had Shabbos Chazoin. Chazarah is known that there's a famous explanation from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who explains that Chazarah means also vision. What's the meaning of Shabbos Chazarah? That the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, explained it as a famous parable, famous mashal which was given by Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, of a father that once made a beautiful garment for his child, and his child didn't behave properly, so the garment tore. So the father gave the child another chance and he made another garment for him. The child again did not treat the garment properly and the garment was damaged and fell apart. Came to the third time. The father said, no, now I'm not going to give you this garment again. I will make the garment and I will keep it with me. And from time to time I will show it to you. And when you will be worthy, I will give it to you. The same is the idea of Shabbos Chazarah. The Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Those who are fortunate can see the third Beis HaMikdash. So we just had, a few weeks ago, we had Shabbos Chazarah. And now we are entering into the month of Elul. And today we read Parshas Re'eh, which again emphasizes the idea of Re'iyah, the idea of vision. Especially that from today is 27 days in the month of Chav Zayin is Zach. Zach relates to Shemen Zayis Zach, pure oil which was used in the Beis HaMikdash for kindling the menorah. So we're going to be fortunate to have the third Beis HaMikdash. When we have the third Beis HaMikdash, we will have Moshe and Aaron. They will rise in Tchias HaMesim. So we will have Aaron again kindling the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash with Shemen Zayis Zach. Tomorrow is the day of Koyach, of 28, Chavches is Koyach. In other words, this gives us strength to fulfill this Avodah. And from the day of Koyach, we go into the following day, which is called, day of Erev Rosh Chodesh is called the Svarim Yom Kippur Cotton, the small Yom Kippur. And from there we enter into the 2 days of Rosh Chodesh Elul, which both are also on special days. The first day of Rosh Chodesh comes out on a Tuesday. And in the creation of Tuesday we find that it's mentioned twice Toiv, because it emphasizes Toiv LaShamayim v'Toiv LaBriyos. And then we come to Wednesday, which is the second day of Rosh Chodesh. That is also a special day, because that is the day when HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Shaboy Nitlu HaMa'oros. That is the day when HaKadosh Baruch Hu has instituted the illuminators on the world, the big illuminator and the small illuminator, the Shemesh and the Yereach, which both have tremendous advantages. So the Rebbe has concluded that we shall be zeicher to have all of these inyanim in a format of re'iyah, of vision, and b'chlal Shabbos always has a shaychus to Geula. Why? Because every Shabbos reminds us on the Yom Shekulei Shabbos Menucha L'Chayei Elomim. When will that be? That will be with the coming of Mashiach. So now on Shabbos we already have some sort of a relationship, a special relation to the concept of Geula. And all of this will be with the coming of the third Beis HaMikdash, which we are so anxiously awaiting. Then the Rebbe concluded, we are now in the second Shabbos after 15 days in the month of Av. Regarding 15 days in the month of Av, the Gemara tells us, Lo yichoyu yomim tovim liYisrael ki chamisha asa ba'av v'chayom kippurim. That Yidden, there was no Yontif that Yidden had that's as great as the 15th day in Av and Yom Kippur. And the Gemara discusses that it's suitable that from the 15th day of Av we should increase in the learning of Torah. The Gemara uses the expression Man de Moisef Yosef. The Rebbe spoke about it at length previous Shabbosim, that the one who adds, he's Moisef, he increases in the learning of Torah, years are added to him. Moisifin Yomav, it adds years to him. So Bechlal, when a Yid learns Torah, and it brings out, at all times when a Yid learns Torah, Chazal tell us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yoshev V'Sheina Kenegdo. A Yid is learning Torah, and the Rebbe is sitting opposite him, and he's also learning Torah. And as the Alter Rebbe elaborates at length in Tanya, that there's no way that a Yid can become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu other than by learning Torah. Alter Rebbe uses the expression, this is a Yichud Nifla. This is a wonderful association, which there's no other association in comparison to this. And when does this happen? When a Yid learns Torah. Because when a Yid learns Torah, he's getting the mind of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the mind of a Yid at that time becomes elevated from level to level until it reaches the source of Torah, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All this happens by learning Torah. Therefore the Rebbe, concluding that this also relates to this week's Seder, to the union of Ra'ei Anoichi Noisen Lefneicha Ma'yom Bracha. That a Yid has to realize that when we're learning Torah, it relates to Anoichi. Who is Anoichi? Anoichi is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chazal tell us regarding Aseres HaDibros that Aseres HaDibros begin with the word Anoichi. Chazal say that Anoichi abbreviates Ano, Nafshi, Ksovis, Yehovis. But the Rebbe says, I, Ano, Nafshi, the Nefesh of Hashem, He has written and given it over through Torah. In other words, when we are learning Torah, we are grasping HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the message, says the Rebbe, for those of us that are going to go out, this relate contents of this Farbrengen to Yidden and Shuls, or we relate it to our own self, or when we meet a Yid and we address this Yid, or when the Yechida Shebenefesh, that is the highest level within every person. There are 5 levels to a neshama. It's explained in Chassidus. The highest of it, which is titled Yechida. This Yechida is Maloshin Yochid. This relates to the Yechida Shalom, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Yechida Shebenefesh is relating to the rest of the person, trying to bring out what is the message, what is the clear message from this week's Seder. So we have to know that the message from the Seder is Ra'ei Anoichi Noisen. Ra'ei Meloshin Re'iyah. We have to see the truth in everything. And when we look into the truth, we realize that all in Yonim of Ruchnias, all in Yonim, all spiritual matters are in a format of Re'iyah. We have them in a format like we envisioned them, it's right in front of us. Gashmis, the matters, we do not have in a way of Re'iyah. That is not something which we envision. However, Ruchnias, Torah, our association to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Anila Daidi, this we have to have in a format of Re'iyah. It has to become penetrated into us as something which we have just seen. And this is what the pasuk goes on, Lifneichem. Lifneichem touches to see this to the pnimius of a Yid, the pnimiyuschem. It goes into the essence of the neshama. And then the pasuk goes on, Hayoim. Continues. What's Hayoim? It has to illuminate, it has to be lichtig, just like day. Just like day shines, and it is light out. The same, this whole lineage which we are talking about, we have to have it as clear as the day, just as daylight. Or furthermore, yet deeper, says the Rebbe, Hayoim. As Chazal say, that every day we have to envision the Torah as if we have received it on this day. Not something which is an old thing, which we have it so long already. And this is human nature. Human nature is something which is fresh. We'll react to it with much more enthusiasm, with much more interest. And the same says the Rebbe, this is the interpretation of the pasuk, where the pasuk here uses the expression Hayoim, that we have to envision all these things and we have to react to all these things as if we have just received it all today. And this is the Avodah which we are entering, the Avodah of Anila Doidi V'Doidi Li, which abbreviates Elul. But notice at the end of every word there is a Yud. Ani, V'Doidi, V'Doidi Li, all end with Yud. The numeric value of a Yud is 10. 4 times 10 is 40. This corresponds to the 40 days from the beginning of Elul until Yom Kippur. 40 days. And during these 40 days when we have to be involved in this Avodah. And the truth is, says the Rebbe, that this Avodah begins while we are still in the last part of the month of Av. The mazel of the month of Av is Aryeh. Aryeh abbreviates Elul, Rosh Aleph for Elul, the Reish for Rosh Hashanah, the Yud for Yom Kippurim, and the Hey of Aryeh refers to Hoshayna Rabbah, because that is when we have the final climax of the Piska Tova, of the conclusion of the Gemach Simchat Torah. This already leads into the new year. This year which we are in now was the year of Tafshin Nun, the year of Tehei Shnas Nisan. This leads into next year, which will be Tehei Shnas Arenu Niflois. Tafshin Nun Aleph abbreviates Tehei Shnas Arenu Niflois. Arenu again the Lashon Re'iyah. Aleph. Re'iyah, we will envision the wonders which the Rebishter will do. And all of this is beginning right from now. From now still being in the month of Av, as we just mentioned, because the month of Av also relates to the month of Elul, especially today that we have already blessed the new month. And when we bless the new month, we answer Amen B'Birchas HaChodesh. And not only do we answer ourselves Amen, but we make sure that the children who we bring in shul also answer Amen. And we shackle ourselves and we shackle our children. We shake ourselves. In other words, it shows on the enthusiasm which we have while we are saying it. And everybody is answering Amen on the new month which we are entering, this very special month of Elul. This month which brings this special significance of Ani l'Doidi v'Doidi li, how he realizes that he has to become close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all this in a format of Re'iyah, of vision. And vision stresses how this is true and permanent, and how nothing can interfere with this. And all of this is the Avodah of Elul. And the conclusion of the Seder is, how does this week's Seder finish? Says the Rebbe, V'hoyisa ach sameach, that we have to do all this Avodah. This Avodah has to be done amidst simcha, joy. And we know that there's a Chazal tells us on the pasuk of Yom Simchaschem. Chazal say, Eilu HaShabbosos, that Shabbos is called the day of simcha. So from this Shabbos of today, which is supposed to be a day of simcha, we will come to the mood of a Ha'isa Ach Sameach, to be besimcha, to be happy, and we will all together come to the Beis Hamikdash. And Ach Sameach, only happiness. And we will come to the Beis Hamikdash. Neder Rebbe referred that a few years ago we had the year of Hakel. What is the mitzvah of Hakel? The mitzvah of Hakel is that on the Sukkos, after the year of Shemitah, all the Yidden, men, women, and children, all would come to the Beis Hamikdash and would hear Parshiyas B'Torah, how it is read from the Melech, from the Nasi B'Yisrael. Says the Rebbe, now is the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should do the mitzvah of Hakel. How does the Rebbe should do the mitzvah of Hakel? By bringing all of us together, by gathering all the Yidden, men, women, and children, bringing us all out of Galus, and bringing us all to the Beis Hamikdash, to the third Beis Hamikdash, which will be an eternal and a permanent Beis Hamikdash. And there we will all hear Parshiyas B'Torah. And by doing this, the Rebbe will fulfill from his side the mitzvah of Hakel. The Rebbe continued again, the Farbrengen, that we get a source, the strength and the source of strength to be able to fulfill all these inyanim we get from the Pasha which we read in the week. And being that this Pasha is Pasha's Riyeh, Riyeh means that we should be able to see the truth. Not only should we be able to see the koyach hapoyel b'nifal, in other words, how everything is existing through HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how everything was created through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'dvar Hashem shamayim nasu, how everything was created through the Dvar Hashem, but we should be fortunate to see Amitis HaMetzias. What is Amitis HaMetzias? Amitis HaMetzias is we should be able to see godliness itself. We should be able to see Elokus. And this is the idea of Re'eya Noichi Noising. What is the idea of Noising? Noising teaches the Rebbe, Kol HaNoising Ba'ayin Yofa Noising. Anyone that gives with a good eye. In other words, we should give with a good eye. And when we give with a good eye, we give above any type of limitations. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that regarding contributing tzedakah. But even though in Gemara it's mentioned that tzedakah one can give only ma'isa, which is 1/10 of his earnings, or at the most 1/5 of his earnings, the Alter Rebbe brings out how one can give even more than that when he's giving above his limitations. The Rebbe says that even on Shabbos, we can also give tzedakah. How do we give tzedakah on Shabbos? Shabbos, we're not allowed to handle any phones. So first of all, if we have guests in our homes on Shabbos, we give tzedakah. Or if we sit next to another Jew at the Farbrengen, and we give another Jew a little bit of mashke to say l'chaim. He says l'chaim. So, but this is also an act of tzedakah, saying l'chaim for the coming of Mashiach. So this in itself is an act of tzedakah. Rabbi Yehuda, when he was talking earlier, how today we benched the new month. After Birchas HaChodesh we say Ashrei. And in Ashrei we have a pasuk that begins with every letter of the Aleph Beis. What does that mean? That means it goes through all levels of Seder Ishtalshalos. Not only that, in Chabad we have the custom that we say Tehillim every Shabbos Mevorcha. And Tehillim also begins with Ashrei and ends with Koil HaNeshama Tahalal Yudkar. And when we say Tehillim, we usually don't have any interruptions in the middle. The only interruptions which we have is the saying of the Yeratzon and the Kaddish. So Kaddish we know is not an interruption, but on the contrary, Kaddish is an elevation. So that means that each time the Kaddish is said in the middle of Tehillim, it's a yet higher elevation. And especially now that we are at the time of Mincha, but I was talking about this, it's already time of Shabbos afternoon. In the Tefillah of Shabbos Mincha we say, Goy Echad Ba'aretz. So there's a famous Chassidus Shetaich. What does it mean? That the Avodah of Yidden is, Yidden are the Goy, the nation, that brings the Echad, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in this Oretz HaGashmi, in this Gashmistic world. This is where the concept of Echad is introduced by this Goy, by this nation, by Yidden. The Rebbe concluded with a medrash. There's a Yalkut Shemaini, which Yalkut Shemaini was publicized now. There's a lot of publicity. You see it hanging on the walls of 770. The Medrash says that a time will come when the king of Poras, the king of Aram, Poras obviously means Iran, and Aram means the area of Iraq, obviously. Aram Naharaim. Yeah. And they will be, the Medrash tells us that they will be involved in a very big war. And the Rebbe will tell Yidden, children, don't be afraid. My children, don't be afraid. The time for your Geula has come. And then the Medrash concludes yet more. That after the Rebbe will give us the Beis HaMikdash, Mashiach will get on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, on the gag of the Beis HaMikdash. And from there he will proclaim that the Geula is already here, that Mashiach has come and has taken us all out of Galus. The Rebbe again concluded, emphasized it again at the end of the Farbrengen, that it's customary to tie every Inyan into something which we have to bring down into reality. Reality for ourselves, reality for our family, and reality for our environment. Something which we are going to walk away with, which we have to do in Maisa, in deed, which deed supersedes everything. So we have to remember this concept which we just discussed of Ra'eya Noichi Noisein Lefneichem Hayoim. That any matter that's dependent on Yiddishkeit, anything that relates to Yiddishkeit has to be in a format of Re'eh, of Re'iyah. Not that we have to bring any proof on it, or we have to bring any type of evidence on it. It is something which we see in front of our own eyes. And seeing something means it is here, it is permanent. Permanent, here to stay. There's a concept in Halacha of Nahoris HaMechazvin. Halacha discusses if a flow of water which stops once in 70 years, Nahoris HaMechazvin Achas L'Sheva Shanim. So the Gemara refers to it that it's called Nahoris HaMechazvin. What's Mechazvin? Mechazvin is Meloshin Kozov, false. In other words, if it's not constant, if it even stops once in 7 years, it's called false. So getting back to our Indian, the Indian of Re'iyah, it has to be something which we have to realize that spiritual matters, in Yonim of Yiddishkeit, in Yonim of Torah, this is something which we have to have in a format of Re'iyah. It is here, it is permanent, we don't need any evidence for it. And this is something which is in a way in a format of hayoim, lichtig. It's illuminated, brings illumination to us. And we become one with the Anoichi, Ra'ei Anoichi. Who is the Anoichi? The Anoichi is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We become totally united with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the Avodah of Anila Doidi. And ultimately this leads back to the response of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'Doidi Li, and all of this comes down in a format of Re'iyah. We vision this, we see it in front of us. It's not something that somebody told us or we need proof on it, we need evidence. We see it, it's right in front of our eyes, and we have access to it, and we do it. And all of this will lead, as the Rebbe concluded, that we will have the coming of Mashiach with the third Beis HaMikdash, and all of this will be in a format of Re'iyah, where we will have in front of our eyes the third Beis HaMikdash together with Moshe Rabbeinu, together with Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen was a Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu, it's brought in Svarim, even though his children had a status of Leviim, but Moshe himself at all times also had a status of a Kohen Gadol, and they will be able to go back into the Beis HaMikdash and kindle the menorah again, as we had in the past, and we will have it now in an eternal way in the third Beis HaMikdash.